You asked for it and you got it. The Falcons dominated Carolina on the ground.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for far too long, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that goes strong with me as everydayers of this pod. That means you make it your first listen or first watch each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today we'll be talking about the Falcons defense, their performance, special teams, Kyle Pitts, the Kirk Cousins chaos meter, all the usual suspects in this rapid reaction to the Falcons 38-20 win over the Carolina Panthers in week 6 to get their record to 4-2, 3-0 in the NFC South, but we'll start off with, everybody wanted to see domination from the Atlanta Falcons in this game. And you look at the final score, you're like, oh, the Falcons dominated. It was closer than probably the final score would indicate until late in the fourth quarter, kind of similar to that season opening win against Carolina last year, where the Falcons and the Carolina were kind of neck and neck for like 3 quarters, and then the Falcons kind of pulled away in the fourth quarter. That was kind of how this game went. But, if you wanted dominance, you can look for it. You can find it with the Falcons run game. They dominated this game on the ground, finished the game with 198 yards rushing. It was really 203, but unfortunately some Kirk Cousins kneel downs, cost them that, 200 rushing game, but relatively even split between Tyler Allgeier and Bijan Robinson in terms of production. I think Allgeier had 18 carries for 105 yards and a touchdown. Bijan had 15, I think, for 95 and 2 touchdowns. And, I was joking on the postcast with Tanitra Batiste over at Locked On Sports Atlanta that, there were points in this game where the Falcons were kind of throwing the ball too much, right? They had 33 design runs in this game, and it felt like for a large chunk of this game, that number should have been over 40 because the run game was so effective. I looked at the final box score, and the Falcons' success rate in terms of their running game was 73% on those 33 designed runs, 76% success rate on first down. And for those of you not familiar with success rate, it is basically a better way to measure rushing efficiency than yards per carry, because yards per carry is too skewed by long runs or negative runs. And success rate basically measures, basically says all yards aren't the same. Basically getting a 10-yard run on a 3rd and 15 is not as valuable as getting a 2-yard run on a 3rd and 1, right? And so success rate looks at down and distance and measures basically, was it, pass fail basis, was it a good run or not, a successful run or failure in that regard. And as I've explained many times over the years, when talking about success rate, you ideally want your running game to be above 45%. 50% is good, very good. Anything above 50% is basically you're kicking butt. And so to have a success rate of like 73% is basically as good as it gets in the National Football League. It is the expectation that this is what the Falcons running game is going to look like for the majority of the rest of the season. No, I think this is the Falcons dominating, this particular matchup. And it goes back to something that Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta said on our preview episode on Friday, where it's like he wants to see the Falcons take advantage of matchups. They took advantage of this matchup going up against a soft Carolina Panthers defense. They're soft up front. They talk about no lanterns, no Kryptonians, right? No Derek Brown, no Brian Burns, no Jadeveon Clowney in this game. A'Shawn Robinson got injured, halfway through the game. So basically, it was Carolina's second string outside of like Shy Tuttle, out there trying to stop this ground game, and they couldn't stop it clearly from the case of this game. So, you like to see these types of games taking advantage of a weak defense. Will the Falcons have this level of success the rest of the season? I wouldn't bet on it. Again, maybe there is another matchup later this season against a bottom 5 or bottom 10 rushing team that the Falcons can dominate and whatnot. But this is certainly a game that, will inspire this team to be a little bit more balanced moving forward, where the last couple of weeks they kind of gotten out of there by leaning a little, maybe too much on their passing game. And so, they know that they can run the football at least against a bad defense. So something that we wanted to see. Again, you didn't get necessarily the 51, 14 type of dominance that I'm sure many of you guys thought the Falcons would get in this game, but you did get one aspect of the dominance, which was that dominant ground game. So, if you're feeling sad about the Falcons not dominating this game in the ways that you wanted, just focus on the ground game and just go back, and watch Bijan's runs and Allgeier's runs, and you'll feel a lot better about that. But let's talk about the passing game. We got to talk about that Kirk Cousins chaos meter. And for those of you not familiar with this concept, this is something we've done every week on the rapid reaction after the game, sort of measuring the chaos that Kirk Cousins is bringing to the table, good, bad, and all things in between. This is something that we got from Locked On Vikings host Luke Braun from his Twitter feed over the last couple of years. We just do it on the podcast because we ain't fooling with Twitter like that. And the 5 levels of the chaos meter is originally 4 from Luke, and I added a 5th level. Level 1 is basically Kirk Cousins being too conservative. Level 2 is Kirk Cousins being an effective game manager. Level 3 is peak Kirk, right? Where you get a little bit of chaos that he goes above being that game manager, and you get the peak version of Kirk Cousins. We've seen a couple of peak performances from Kirk so far this year. We've seen a number of game manager games, and we've seen at least one, level 4 Kirk Cousins chaos, where it's just pure, it's too much chaos, right? That was the week 1 game against the Steelers. And then we added a 5th level to the Kirk Cousins chaos meter, which is, is it so chaotic to the point where it's like we need to start having a conversation about Michael Penix, stepping into the lineup. And, this game to me was a classic sort of level 2 game manager game for Kirk. He was efficient. I think he had like a 97 passer rating. I think his adjusted net yards per attempt in this game was 8.2 or something like that. A very good number. And you didn't need Kirk to go out there and sling it with the Falcons running game having the success. Again, maybe they threw it a little too much. They got a little too pass happy at certain points where, there was like a couple of times where they were getting into like 4 or 5 straight passes, and it was like, just run the ball. But, again, that's nitpicking at the end of the day. And Kirk was doing a good job getting the ball into the hands of the playmakers. We'll talk about, maybe some of the playmakers not making the plays that you wanted them to make in this game. But, again, we could probably nitpick a little bit on Kirk, but classic sort of level 2 game manager stuff. So very little chaos in this game from Kirk, at least on the initial watch. Maybe we'll go back and watch the film and we'll see like, oh, well, Kirk got away with something on that, and we might have to change our chaos, but probably not. I haven't felt the need to change any of the chaos meter readings, post game from the initial view. Although last week was like, I think we said at level 3, but it was getting up there to level 4 with some of the chaos that Kirk was bringing to the table. But it wound up balancing out where I think it was more favorable than negative in that game last week against Tampa Bay. But we will talk about the chaotic defensive play for the Atlanta Falcons, where it was a lot more up and down for the Falcons defense. While the offense was rolling, the defense wasn't. And we'll talk about why the Falcons defensive scheme continues to hold that side of the ball back as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, have you ever felt like you needed that little boost in the bedroom? Well, it's time to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims so that you can feel confident knowing that you can get it up when you get it down when the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. They have a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. And the process is 100% online, so there's no need for those uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. And guys, time is often a precious commodity, and sometimes I find myself disappointed with how much time I feel like I'm wasting scrolling mindlessly on my phone. And I often think, like, could I spend this time more wisely looking at ways to improve myself? And thankfully, our sponsor, Hillsdale College, has an offer of more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses on history, politics, economics, philosophy, chemistry, and mathematics. All the courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. So we're talking about the Falcons' defensive ups and downs, and this Carolina game was a classic Falcons defensive performance that we have come to get accustomed to now 6 weeks into this 2024 season. It was the classic bend but don't break performance for this Falcons defense. You know, the play is a little suspect for 3 quarters, and then the Falcons turn it on in the fourth quarter. And, you know, unlike the last couple of weeks where you usually have to wait till like the final 4 minutes of the fourth quarter before the Falcons defense turn it on, they at least turned it on with 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, right? And that was with an A.J. Terrell interception, with Carolina driving down the field, you know, potentially to you know, tie the game down 28-20 at that point. That's where I say, like, this game was a little closer than probably people realize, at least for the first, 50 minutes of this game. And, AJ gets that interception. It's his first interception since 2021, week 17 against the Bills, 37 games without an interception. So finally broke that streak. So at least the people that have been criticizing AJ Terrell for his lack of ball production over the last 37 games, at least those people will be quiet for at least 6 more days. So we'll see on that front. But you saw the Falcons defense follow that turnover, and the Falcons were able to convert that into points. And then they followed that with a turnover on downs on the Panthers' next series. And then Clark Phillips added his own interception, nearly a pick 6 on that final drive. Go check out the Locked On Falcons, Locked On Sports Atlanta postcast for Tanitra Batiste and my thoughts on whether or not we would have, taken it into the end zone to get our pick 6, because we're selfish and we're not team first guys like Clark Phillips is. But Clark should have had a pick 6, but he decided, I'm going to stop at the 5-yard line so the Falcons can kneel down, ruin their 200-yard rushing game, by the way. So, Clark, I'm blaming you on that. If you just scored the touchdown, we would have finished this game with 200 yards rushing. You ruined that, Clark. How dare you, sir? I will hold that against you for the next 5 years. No, I'm kidding. But, I think, the Falcons defense turned it on in the fourth quarter, handing Andy Dalton his first loss of his career against the Atlanta Falcons. So, we got a Tom Brady loss a couple of years ago. We got an Andy Dalton. Which one? Like Desmond Ridder beating Tom Brady or Kirk Cousins beating Andy Dalton? Which one is going to go into the, Ring of Honor down in Flowery Branch? You be the judge on that one. But, basically up until that fourth quarter, the defense wasn't great. They were getting kind of gashed on the ground, especially leading up to that Terrell pick where I think Chuba Hubbard had carried the ball 5 of the previous 6 plays before that AJ interception and gained 36 yards on those 5 carries. But he finished the game, Chuba Hubbard, that is, with a 50% success rate, which is a good number, as I explained earlier. But however, prior to that final drive where we got those 5 carries, his success rate was 38%. So you could say, hey, through first 3 quarters of the game, the Falcons' run defense was effective, limiting Carolina to 38% success rate. Anything below 40% is bad rushing for the offense, so good run defense for the defense. So you can certainly make the case that the Falcons' run defense was fine. But that kind of illustrates the point I've been making over the last week, especially here on the podcast, that that is a testament to me of the bend but don't break defense, where at that point in the game, when the Falcons let Chuba Hubbard at the beginning of the fourth quarter just kind of run the ball down their throat and allow Carolina to move the ball effectively, they were basically we're not going to give up the big explosive play in the air in order to let Carolina easily back into this game. And so Carolina just proceeded where, arguably the clock is your enemy at that point in time, although with, double-digit minutes left in the game, it's not as if it's that much of an obstacle to overcome at that point in the game. It did become later in the game. And like, that's what I mean, where I'm like, we're talking about this defense, that bend but don't break defense, where the Falcons were like, okay, we don't want to give up the big play. And so Carolina was like, okay, we're just going to run it down your throat, as they did on those 5 plays for to Chuba to get 36 yards and put them potentially in scoring position before AJ Terrell did his thing and made that interception, undercutting a crosser to, I think, Ian Thomas at that point in time. And so it gets back to the point I've been making a lot on this podcast these last couple of days. It's like the Falcons' defensive issues, and I wrote about this on the Falcoholic this past week as well. Like, I think the Falcons' defensive issues aren't related to their personnel. It's really about their scheme, right? And that's not meant to call, Jimmy Lake a bad defensive coordinator or whatever, but it's just they play this style of defense that is going to allow teams to kind of move the ball at will, because they're basically going to say, we're not going to give up the big play, and you can kind of do whatever you want to us after that, besides that. But we will definitely not allow you to get the big play over through the air. And again, the Falcons are, going into this week, and I'm assuming that they'll remain at the top. But the Falcons went into this week as the team that had given up the least amount of explosive plays in the NFL, 20-plus yard plays in the NFL this year. And that's the one thing that this defense has been good at, is we're not going to give up the big play, but we're just going to let you, get 5-6 yards and matriculate the ball down the field, as they say. And, people were talking about, did Nate Landman improve the run game? Again, you can make the argument that the run defense was effective for 3 quarters, but I don't know if it was really, the run game. It was really, when the Falcons were effective stopping the run, it was getting those negative runs. And you saw Grady Jarrett get a bunch of those TFLs in that situation. And as I've discussed many times, like, this defense is effective when they are effective on early downs, when they're getting those negative or neutral, plays on early downs. You saw in this game a number of times the Falcons defense were able to get in 3rd and long and get stops on those particular plays. And like, that's, to me, is going to be the solution to this Falcons defense. We discussed it on Friday with Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta, that if this team can be more effective at neutralizing offenses on early downs, as you saw at various points in this game and as you've seen at various points this season, you will start to see this defense perform much better. Right, you'll start to see this pass rush get home. You'll start to see, potentially more turnovers and whatnot, because the offense is at a disadvantage. But if the offense is constantly able to stay ahead of the chains, it's going to be a problem for this defense, and it's going to continue to put them in bad spots until we get to the red zone, until we get to the 4th quarter. And then you just kind of hope, hey, they make the plays that you need to make, and your offense is doing the things that they need to do in order for you to win games. And so, I know the trade deadline is coming up in a couple of weeks. I know there's going to be a lot of speculation from folks like, what players should the Falcons go out there and trade for on defense in order to improve this defense, especially this pass rush. And I'm going to sit here and continue to pound the table, guys, and say it's not really about the Falcons personnel. Again, no one's going to sit here and tell you, hey, Falcons shouldn't go out there and try to upgrade their personnel or anything like that. But it's really scheme. That all their issues, in my humble opinion, are scheme related. That the scheme is what is allowing teams to have success against the Falcons. And it's not necessarily they don't have the talent. They don't have the personnel. It's one of the reasons why, players like Justin Simmons and Matthew Judon haven't made this huge difference this upcoming season. And several players that were so effective for the Falcons last year, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, are not playing to the same degree in this, again, not trying to sit here and be like, it's all Jimmy Lake's problem, but like, this coaching staff has made choices of, we're going to play a certain style of defense. We have a certain philosophy on defense. And I don't think that philosophy is conducive for a team to basically play, lights out, shut down defense. But again, as long as they're winning games, the only person that's going to complain about that is me. I know Raheem's not going to complain about that. I know Jimmy Lake's not going to complain about that. Just like Dean Pease wasn't complaining. Like, all he cared about was, did we win the game or not? And I'll do what I got to do in order to make it work. Now, I defended Dean Pease in those years in 21 and 22 when they had that bend but don't break defense, because I thought the personnel, you had to make lemonade out of lemons with what Dean Pease was asked to do. I don't think Jimmy Lake has to make lemonade out of lemons. Is basically why I'm going to be a little bit more critical of Jimmy Lake today, given that I do think you have better talent on that defensive side of the ball, that you don't necessarily have to play that style, coupled with an offense that, we talked about that a ton with Dean Pease, where it's like, if the Falcons got into a hole and they gave up a big play early in the game and then the opposing team scored, got off to a 10-0 lead, they were kind of doomed at that point in time. They couldn't play from behind because they didn't have the firepower, they didn't have the quarterback play, they didn't have the weapons, all that stuff in 21 and 22. that shouldn't be an issue in 2024 with Kirk Cousins and all the weapons that the Falcons have and the way that the offense has played the last couple of weeks in the month of Kirktober. So again, I'm going to be a lot more critical of that philosophy moving forward here on the podcast. So, if you get upset when someone's like, hey, this is a bad scheme, you probably are going to be upset listening to Locked On Falcons for the next couple of weeks until the Falcons, to me, start making adjustments to their scheme that is going to allow them to be better on early downs so that they will be better on late downs, as we've discussed before. Went into this weekend dead last in third down defense, dead last in pass rush, 28th in run defense. Again, I think a lot of these issues are related to the scheme where the Falcons are just like, we're gonna concede yards at will as long as we don't give up points. And again, it's a choice. It's working. They're 4-2. So, again, I can only complain about it. The rest of the world won't, but it is what it is. So we will talk about the rebound performance for the special teams. We'll talk about, Kyle Pitts. Is he starting to be a problem as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons? Guys, PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 10 million active members because it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Because unlike other apps, PrizePicks, it's just you versus the numbers. You just pick more or less on up to 6 players' stat projections, and you can watch the winnings roll in. And if you're looking to get in on the action because certain sports books aren't available in your state, don't worry, PrizePicks is. And withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. And you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. So whether you want to go on Bijan or Allgeier or Darnell Mooney or Kyle Pitts on their more or less projections and, watch those winnings roll in, go ahead and download the PrizePicks app today and make sure you use code LOCKEDONNFL and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. PrizePicks, run your game. So let's touch upon the Falcons' special teams having a nice rebound performance with a big play from Zach Harrison on a partially blocked punt. And then Clark Phillips kind of scooped that up, returned it 15 yards, and that set up a score, right? The Falcons were basically gifted 40 yards of field position that had that been a regular punt, they would have had, go an extra 40 yards. And this is what we talk about where big plays equal points, right? And for special teams, partially blocked punts, for defenses, turnovers and whatnot, any type of play that flips field position like that is considered a big play. And wanted to point that out just because we talked last week about the special teams having a pretty rough game against Tampa Bay. And so it was nice to see that unit rebound. And so we'll at least say 2 positive things about the Atlanta Falcons on today's illustrious rapid reaction. But, we had a big play earlier in the game to Kyle Pitts that set up a score, the second touchdown of the game. So again, reiterating the point that you've often heard me say, big plays equal points. But that's not going to be the talking point with Kyle Pitts after this game, because he could have had a potential touchdown in the third quarter, although it probably wouldn't have been a touchdown if you ask me. But there was a 3rd and 11 at the end of the third quarter. The Panthers blitzed. Kirk Cousins threw a fade to Kyle Pitts at the back pylon on the end zone. Kyle Pitts didn't finish the route. And I'm going to defend Kyle Pitts similar to what I did on the postcast. If you're going to give Kyle Pitts the benefit of the doubt, and your mileage may vary, but the issue with Kyle Pitts is I understand why Kyle Pitts didn't finish that route, because they haven't thrown that ball all season long, right? Where the Falcons go 3-by-1, where they have Mooney, McLeod, and London on one side of the field, and Kyle Pitts singled up on the other side of the field. He's on the one side, and he just runs a vertical fade clear out sort of route. And the Falcons haven't thrown that ball all season long. And so I can understand what Kyle Pitts is thinking, hey, they're not going to throw me the ball. And so he doesn't run a full route. Now, again, is that something that a player should be doing, a professional NFL player should be doing? No, right? The other area where I might defend Kyle Pitts, and again, I don't know his answer to this, but he sort of, again, cut his route short. And you can make the argument that maybe he did it because he because the blitz was coming and he thought the ball was going to come out quick. So running all the way to the back pylon would have taken too much time for the ball to come out. And he thought Kirk was going to throw it, shorter. Again, Probably not. That again, we're reaching. I know you're probably sitting there, Aaron. You're reaching on these. Fine. Again, I want to point that out just because, like, to me, this is not a big deal. Obviously, for a lot of people, because Kyle Pitts is a lightning rod, a polarizing sort of figure amongst fantasy football people and Falcon fans and whatnot. So this one play, again, a negative play. Not going to sit here and say, oh, Kyle Pitts was justified in doing what he did. He was wrong, right? But this is a relatively easy fix is basically the point I'm going to get to, which is like, you just go, hey, we're going to throw this. I'm going to throw this to you, Kyle. I need you to do this. And like, Kyle's like, okay, I'll run the route. And then you solve the problem. So, again, I know this is going to lead to a lot of people going to extremes, defending or criticizing Kyle Pitts. And I just wanted to give you my 2 cents on the situation. So I will defend Kyle Pitts in the sense of, like, I understand why he quit on the route. It's basically what I'm saying, because, like, Kirk's not going to throw this football to me. So, again, if I was in my shoes, but again, that's why I'm sitting here on a podcast and not a professional athlete. So, despite my excuses, no excuses for that. Kyle's got to do better, but just wanted to point that out and give my 2 cents on that particular issue. But the other issue emerging from this game was some injuries. The Falcons had 2 safeties not finish this game. Micah Abernathy injured his knee after the Falcons opening series on a punt coverage, and he was out for the rest of the game. So that may be a serious injury that we'll have to sort of see. He had to get help walking off the field. And then later in the game on the Panthers' penultimate series in the fourth quarter, Justin Simmons exited game with a hamstring. Raheem Morris did say after the game that was more precautionary at this point in time, but Richie Grant did finish the game in this one and got some snaps in some big dime early in this game as well. So we did get to see a little bit of Richie Grant in this game. But we'll keep an eye on that, because obviously you have basically, if Simmons is injured and Abernathy is injured, you only have 2 safeties. So we may see some moves in terms of the Falcons bolstering their safety depth. I don't know if Dane Cruikshank is back on the practice squad. I think they cut him off the practice squad, but if he's still available, you might see something like that, him getting re-signed or something like that. So those are my thoughts on this game. The Falcons are 4-2. They're in a good spot, 3-0 in the division. We'll see what they do next week against Seattle. It's going to be probably a much tougher defense than what they saw this Sunday. We'll see how the injuries impact Seattle's defense. I know they've been pretty beat up on that side of the ball. We'll see if this bend but don't break defense works as effectively against a quarterback like Geno Smith, who's been playing pretty good football this season. And, the weapons that Seattle has, unlike Carolina. We'll also have some rematches in the division in weeks 8 and 10 against Tampa Bay and New Orleans. So there's still a lot of football left to be played. So, I'm not one of these people that spends too much time or energy worried about standings at this stage in the season. There are no trophies for being in first place in your division in week 7 or anything like that. But, they're in a good spot right now, but we'll see where they are in a couple of weeks, because they still have some tough games coming up. Are we going to still be in first place by the end of Kirktober? Obviously, a lot of football left to be played in this illustrious month of Kirktober. So we'll see where the Falcons are, but there are going to be more challenges on the horizon, more challenging than what Carolina. So it was nice to see the Falcons get a win in a extremely winnable game, take care of business, even if it wasn't always pretty through the first couple of quarters of this game. And they weren't dominating that game in the ways that I think a lot of people were hoping to see early in the game. But, at the end of the day, you got the W. That's all that ultimately matters. And there are some positives to take away from this game, and certainly things that the Falcons will continue to have to work on, and we'll see what they do. Of course, we'll have you locked here as your first listen here on Locked On Falcons. And continue to check us out by subscribing or following for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL to get the scoop on what happened with the other 30 NFL teams. And if you want to hear, Julian Council, host of Locked On Panthers, freak out about the Panthers, he's probably not freaking out. I'm sure Julian's used to it this couple of years. So, at least to get his side of the story, go check out Locked On Panthers as well. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.